Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Influential Nonprofit. As always, I'm your host, Miriam Dersh. And today I'm with my new friend, JD Bauman, and we are going to talk today. I'm so excited. We are going to talk about what he calls effective altruism, which is really turning our good intentions, our passion into actual measurable impact, which that's what we want, right? We want to make change. And sometimes, we may not be making the change we think or having the impact we want. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, JD. I'm so happy you're here. I can't wait to get into this.
Happy to be here. Glad to be here.
Okay, so before I we get into this, I always open with this question, which is, tell me something that you're proud of that you don't get to brag about a lot.
Yeah, well, I guess two things. Can I get two short things? The one is my son just started walking for the first time last week, and
Oh!
this was so exciting to watch. Yeah, and then yeah, I guess I don't get to brag about that because it's so recent, right? But everyone hears about it. Um, yeah, the other is that this year is the first year I've been able to give 50% of my income away, and mostly to the
Wow.
poor. And so that's a real big one that people often don't know about or ask about. And I usually don't volunteer that information. But since you asked, yeah.
Okay, so what was the impetus? What made you, to uh make this a goal to give away 50% of your income?
So yeah, I have always had a heart for those living in need and in poverty. And like when I was young, I did this fundraiser when I was in school selling candy bars. I'd sell candy to other kids. It's kind of a black market. Nobody else is doing it. So I had an opportunity to make some money. And and yeah, I raised like almost about $1,000 and was able to give that away to charity, almost all of it. And as you grow up and you settle into a home and you cover your basic needs, in the West we have so much. We've been blessed with so much. I know there's so many people that don't have what we have, and I wanted to give back. And that's also motivated by my faith. Someone who feels very blessed by God and very fortunate and loved by God. I want to give back because I know God has loved me.
Right. Awesome. That is incredible. Okay, so you are executive director of Christians for Impact and the co-author of a new book on effective altruism called All the Lives You Can Change. And you talk about turning good intentions into real impact. And so moving beyond like the feel-good philanthropy into making, a really impact on the problems that we care about. And I think, okay, most of us get into this work because we are passionate about something. We want to see change. We want to create relationships. Like that's what I do, right? I help people form aligned, authentic, honest relationships. You, you are the, what do I want to say? The you have like I call it steel energy, right? The analytical, you probably never met a spreadsheet you didn't love, correct?
Well, there's plenty of messy spreadsheets in the world,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm more of a
Yeah,
thinker type.
but
Yeah.
it's this idea of the balance of relationship energy and then that analytical data driven energy. And so how can they live together happily? Because I don't think that there is, that I think those worlds are naturally aligned to each other, but I know a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah, a lot of people feel like there's this tension between passion and data, right? Like on the
Right.
one hand, your passion or your sense of calling or you feel led to like promote something or some project or program. But then you look at the data and you look at the evidence, the hard numbers. And sometimes it feels like that's pointing in a different direction. And honestly, sometimes it does. I think at the end of the day, it's passion that brings us to the table. It's really our love that is the best fuel for our vocation and for our mission in the world. We're all in the nonprofit space. We're here because we believe in a mission, right? We're here for the meaning. We're here for the impact. But in the real world, we don't have an impact just by caring about something. To give an example, there's a lot of examples where helping hurts, where people can care about something too much, but they can care about it in implement their care in the wrong way. Uh, Kids always know this example of like helping the caterpillar that's trying to break out and to become a butterfly, right? Like if you push the wrong way, you're actually going to like limit the growth of the butterfly. It might even crush it in its wings before it even sprouts. That's a cheesy example. A real life example comes in a lot of our charity. A lot of charitable programs don't even have no impact. They're actually counter impactful. They actually are harmful for some of those people we're trying to serve. And there's a lot of documented cases of that we talk about in our book, All the Lives You Can Change. And it doesn't have to be that way. So if we're careful about not just being passionate about our service, but also looking at the outcomes, looking at the data and the numbers about whether our helping is hurting or whether it's actually helping, that's so important. And we'll find ways that we can not just do good, but do tens or hundreds of times as much good as we thought possible.
Okay, I have a question. I worked with an organization a couple of years ago. They're very close to my heart, called Episcopal City Mission. Well, everyone I work with is close to my heart, trust me. But and they minister to youth, to children in the juvenile justice system. Okay, and they call themselves a ministry of presence. Um, and because they're there to minister to the kids in care, not, it's about using their faith, to bring a calming presence, right, and a loving presence in what's very difficult circumstances. And then understanding that we are not the sum total of the worst thing we've ever done. And this is about redeeming grace. Um, and also it's hard, it can be maybe at the time I was working with them, to measure impact because they're like, we don't really have outcomes, we're just there for the kids. And I know that they are doing good things, right? I there's no doubt, but can we prove it? Is there an impact we can measure? Is it So I guess that my question is that, does that program still have value? Is it important that every program or every service that we have a measurable impact?
So not every program is measurable in the same way. And it doesn't mean that we should only do things that we can measure super, super closely, like under a microscope, right? When some, when sometimes we have to go off trust and trust based on good stories, right?
Right,
So if I give somebody a gift and they smile and it lights up their day, I think it's a good gift because they have an immediate reaction. It's
right.
a
And that
reaction
and
that's
that's
hard to
evidence.
fake.
That's data.
That's
That's
evidence,
evidence,
right?
right? Hmm.
That's a kind of evidence. Now, I think it's now that's evidence that we've done good. There's also this consideration of have we done the most good we can. One big thing that we talk about when we provide career advising or donation advising is not just okay, are you a part of something that's doing good? Like what you described sounds like it's a wonderful mission and doing good in the world. But there's a question of is it doing the most good it can? There's this wonderful UK charity called Guide Dogs, and they help
Hmm.
people who are seeing impaired get like a seeing eye dog that will help them get around. And it's a wonderful program. And it costs roughly, I think recently the number has been about like $60,000-$70,000 to train and raise and provide a seeing eye dog. But on the other side of the world, there are many people who suffer from this disease called trachoma, which is where their eyelids grow inwards and it scratches their eye and it
Ooh.
causes blindness. It's really awful. It's really awful. But the good news is we can stop trachoma for about 20, now it's about $50 per patient. We can stop this disease that causes blindness. So if you run the numbers, you can help about 1,000 people prevent blindness for about 1,000 people for the same cost as providing a seeing eye dog for one person. They're both good charities. Like they're both doing good in the world. And I wouldn't want to get rid of either one. But if you're asking the question, how can I do the most good? I think the answer is clear that one is more impactful than the other.
Do you feel like, okay, that when these conclusions, but you say, yeah, but my heart really isn't in that. Like I want, because it's this idea of heart, mind, wallet, and most people make decisions, with emotion, right? And then we find the evidence to validate a choice. And I have a philosophy. It's called the philanthropic heart, right? So we, I'm not here to change you or make you believe something, right? You're going to want to be, you're going to care about a cause, not because of the marketing or the person. You're going to care about the cause because of your own lived experience and what's important to you, and you're going to see that reflected in the cause, right? Does that make sense? Right? Like so I'm not, my job in relationship building is not to find people and convince them to care. My job is to find like-minded people and invite them into this community. But what you're saying is like, hey, it's not really about the philanthropic heart or the emotional connection. It's about looking at the measurable impact and then investing in that. Or can both those things live together?
I think if you want to be someone who does good in the world, you can do that without thinking too hard about it. But if you want to be someone that has a maximum impact possible, that really wants to make the most of everything you've been given and do the most good possible, then it's going to require a heart and a head as well. It's going to
Yeah,
require a heart. It's going to require caring, showing up, giving the money away, putting in the hours for your nonprofit or whatever it is you do for your vocation. But then also being thoughtful and strategic about where to put that. Now, if we
right.
stay only with the heart and the stories and where the connections are, we're going to miss out on some of the most incredible opportunities, right? If take the guide dog example, right? If we focus only on the wonderful work that Guide Dogs is doing, we might never hear or learn about the more impactful ways at scale to prevent blindness by treating trachoma.
Right.
Now, the key question is, why are you a part of the nonprofit space? Why are you donating to charity? Why are you a part of change? You is it because it feels good inside and it warms your heart? Or is there a problem in the world that you really want to solve? A problem like blindness? Because if you can name that problem, that outcome that you really care about, and you can think carefully about how can I solve that problem as best as possible, then it's going to help you to understand that there are some ways that are more effective than others. And there are actually some ways that might not be effective at all or even counter effective. So I think really important is to come to the game with that heart, with that passion, name the problem that we really care about and what's beneath that. Is it really is it really blindness or is it people's health in general? Is
Right.
it simply being alive, right? And then find the way to support that as best as possible through our
Right. Okay.
charities, through our nonprofits.
I truly believe that every problem is solvable. Like there's no problem on this earth from hunger to war that we actually do not have the resources to solve if we chose to, right? Um, the problem is a lot of people benefit from those problems, right? And in the nonprofit sector, sometimes we can often propagate the very problems we're wanting to solve because we're not looking at the bigger picture. So, like hunger or homelessness, right? Like we're just going to, oh, take that person off the street, give them a home. But what is causing them to be in this condition anyway? Right? Why are there people who do not have, who are not able to tap into any resources? And that we can, it because if you're looking at issues of like socioeconomic issues, race, right, mental health, those are things that maybe we don't want to talk about, so it's easier just to just like help people who need a home, and work and give them. That's easy, that's tangible. But like racism, that's big, so we keep it small because it's harder. And I think, and I'm just wondering what you think, that that we can actually can keep, not really solve a problem, just it's just we're propagating the problem. I think that's the best language I can use.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We have a section in our book that we call "In Praise of Band-Aids," right? So this idea is like, oh, these are Band-Aid solutions, right? These are just a Band-Aid over the wound, but it's not really solving the underlying cause. We want to push back and offer a different framework for thinking about this.
Okay. Oh,
So
I
you're
love
right.
this. Good.
There are structural problems in the world, right? And I think we should also aim at those. The question is how, right? The structural problems are often very difficult to solve. They're often very contested. It's not always clear. That doesn't mean we shouldn't tackle them, but it's often a lot more complicated. And a lot of us have to make the choice in our career. Are we going to go for a problem that's more clear, that we know how to solve? We just need to scale it. There's maybe simpler logistics, or we're going to go for a messier problem. And for different people and different skill sets and different problems, the choice is going to be different. Sometimes somebody should jump into politics or into movement building. Other times somebody should focus on a more specific concrete action. I love your dog, by the way.
Yeah, my foster puppy just jumped. She was crying underneath me, and I was like, then she wanted to come up, so she's just gonna sit here with me. Because once I close
Not a
the
seeing eye
door,
dog.
I'm not opening it. But right, okay, because and this she just entered the chat at the most perfect time because I volunteer for Stray Rescue of St. Louis. I volunteered for Stray Rescue of St. Louis fostering dogs since 1997. Okay. When the founder would just go get a dog off the street and like bring it to my house. Like we were just this ragtag little group. Now it's like probably a $3-4 million agency. They're building a $50 million complex for for to and stray rescue is specifically for abused, neglected, abandoned. So most of the dogs come that they've been, maybe in from really difficult circumstances, and and so I have conflicting feelings about this because yeah, this is going to be this beautiful, like we've only expanded to serve more and more and more animals, and like that there's always going to be another dog. They'll
Yeah.
all So how can we, I want to look at this in two
So
ways, like to love the dogs
sure.
that we have, right? Like that, her name is Truvy. We're going to love Truvy and make sure she has a great life, but like is it the best use of resources to constantly be expanding and putting money towards housing and treating and get finding homes for more animals, or is it let's help create less animals that are
So
going to be abused, neglected, abandoned?
yeah, so good question. So I want to first address this idea of band-aids, and I want to offer a case to praise band-aids. And then second, I want to talk about your question here. So some band-aid solutions are really effective. Okay. So right now we have about 600 million people living in extreme poverty, living under $2.20 a day. It's a terrible problem. It means worse health, worse education, worse life outcomes, worse self-reported sense of feeling loved or in good mental health, right? Um, Awful problem. We know that we can lift people out of extreme poverty for about $400 a year through the best available interventions like cash transfers or through global health initiatives like providing malaria nets. Um, so if an average American donates 10% of their income, they're able to lift over a dozen people out of extreme poverty for an entire year. Now, some might call that a band-aid solution. I call that a huge win for people who would have otherwise be living in poverty that now get to afford education for their children or can afford medicine for themselves or put a roof over their head. A similar amount of money can literally save somebody's life for about one or two lifetimes from malaria or from some other life-threatening neglected tropical disease. Now, some might say, oh, this is a band-aid solution because ideally we should be having public health infrastructure that's providing for people's healthcare. Now, I agree that would be a nice thing to have, but in a world where that actually isn't the reality, the question that I have to ask is, given the way the world is right now and the resources that I have and in my community, how can we make the greatest impact possible? And sometimes that's going to be the band-aid solutions. But other times it's going to mean the structural solutions. So that's
Yeah,
going to mean, careful planning about what does the future of our health systems look like? What does the future of our, local communities look like with our animal populations?
right,
So that in the future we don't have this kind of suffering.
right. So
So
for
we have
me,
an entire chapter in the book on
I
this.
love
Yeah,
this. This is JD. This is such a fresh perspective. Uh, And because I think, yeah, it's a yes and where sure we can take care of the everyday, but then also, because like I'm going back because this is, animal welfare is like is my well, my kids are adopted out of foster care, and I have foster dogs. Like, you
that's
know,
awesome.
yeah, if you don't have a home, come see me. Yeah. That our shelters are packed, jam packed. They're overrun. So that can be the band-aid of this immediate need. But really, the long-term solution is, you know, like truly, like the long-term solution um, is how can we educate people, right, to create less dogs? And we're actually doing much better in the city of St. Louis where I live. We're actually doing much better. So I really appreciate your view on the Band-Aid, right? There, because they're hurting people right now. I One of the things that I want to get into is you're talking about um our sector being obsessed with low overhead. Um, and I am obsessed with this too. And why do you say that's actually hurting people, or helping when we become obsessed with this overhead?
Yes. So it's so common, right? We just look at what percentage is spent on overhead. And I understand like the instinct and wanting to be a good steward and not overspending on unnecessary things. The problem is that at the end of the day, those we are helping don't actually care what percent we spend on overhead. Like the
Right.
dogs you're providing for, or the people that we can help through our charities or nonprofits, at the end of the day, they don't care what percent we happen to have spent on overhead. They care about whether we served them and whether we were with them and present with them and helped serve the purpose that we exist to serve. Let me tell you a story. So Apple, the phone company, they spend roughly, I mean, they produce like the best, I think, some of the best technology in the world.
Me
I'm
too.
taking this podcast from a Mac right now. Glad you agree. And they spend roughly 50% on overhead. They spend roughly 50% on R&D, on everything but the product themselves. If that were a nonprofit, they'd be getting blasted for spending 50% on overhead. But the question is not how much you spend on overhead, it's do you produce something of huge value? And we have to
Yes.
ask ourselves that as nonprofit leaders. Is our nonprofit, is our organization providing something of incredible value? Now, that's not an excuse to be wasteful with our finances, but that is a reason to invest in research to see, are we actually providing programs that are doing the most good for those that we're serving.
Yes. And, and also we trained our donors to look at overhead, right? We told, oh, we only spend 10%, that was a valuable thing and not, but it's killing the infrastructure, right? We're not reinvesting in people and systems. And so I wouldn't say like, oh, that the people we serve don't care. It's the donors who would say, well, what's your overhead? And like, but I mean, what is your response to that? Because, like Truby doesn't care, how much Stray Rescue spends. I don't care either. Okay. The organizations I love, they're doing great work. That how they spend their money and what they invested in. Like when I buy clothes or food, I don't say like, well, what's the overhead? I
Right,
want
right.
the
Like
shoes,
it
okay?
doesn't bother you
It
when you
doesn't,
go
it's not
shopping
even
at the
part
grocery store
of
at a high
the
overhead.
right of
Yeah.
like, maybe a car because they really lay it out for you, but for most things, we just like what we like and we pay for it. So how can we educate, I guess using effective altruism, like how do we educate donors
Yes.
on why is it important and why it just doesn't matter?
We need to show to evidence-minded donors that what matters is the outcome, whatever that outcome is, right? If you are providing cataract surgeries and you're tackling blindness, you want to show, you don't want to emphasize your overhead. You want to emphasize how much blindness you are solving per dollar, right? That for $50, you're able to
Yes,
give somebody sight who otherwise would be blind, right? And you could do this for hundreds of times less than your, well, friendly, maybe nonprofit competitor or peer, right? You want to show that you are providing the change that you want to see in the world for a much better, much more efficiently than other organizations. And you're not skimping on mission. Actually, you're honoring the mission because
right.
you're stewarding everything you've been given to maximize the
Right.
impact
And
on the
honoring
mission.
the people, and you can't say, well, I want to make this life better while simultaneously working the people, working your staff to the bone, Um, uh, you can't say, oh, we want to create healthy families while, the families that work for you are struggle because they have to spend so much time at work, right? This is how
Yeah,
we,
I mean, just because you have a good mission doesn't give you free license to lie, cheat, or steal, to treat people poorly, right? It's
right,
that goes without saying, and that's been a criticism of effective altruism. So one thing that effective altruists like to do is not just in their charities, but with their giving, a lot of effective altruists like to try to earn as much money as possible in order to give it away to the most effective charities. And there's been some criticism that, well, one temptation of this is that you might do whatever you have to do to get more money. And there have been some bad examples of people who've used that kind of reasoning. But that's absolutely false. If you really care about the world and you really have a mission you believe in, that's not going to stop you from being a good person while
right.
trying to accomplish that mission.
Yes. All right. This is so great. I think that most nonprofits I feel like get a really short runway as far as mm, um understanding what they're doing is effective. So for instance, my husband, he's a molecular biologist, a plant scientist, and he worked for a long time, and then when he finished the big corporate job for the last maybe 10 years, he's been running startups. So so we live in St. Louis. It's a big biotech startup place. So somebody else is going to give him $6 million and about 4 years to figure out if they can make a certain thing work. Okay. So after the whole Elizabeth Holmes Theranos made everybody's life a lot harder. Okay. They were just given money right now. They want you to prove stuff. But so he got 5 years and $6 million to see if he could create drought resistant soybeans. Um, and he couldn't. And but he got $6 million and 5 years to see if this would work. And when it didn't work, nobody was mad, right? He was like, they had fields in
Yeah.
here and in Argentina. They were going back and forth. They couldn't replicate what was going on in the greenhouse. It was going on live. And he said, this is not what we think it's gonna be. Hey, great in principle, and great hypothesis. It's not sustainable. And they stopped and they said, great job for figuring that out. That's now what's the next?
So rare in the nonprofit world, right?
It's
That is so rare.
absolutely unheard of. And why? For what reason do you not get, here's the money, go see what would it take to like reduce juvenile recidivism?
I
What,
have so many strong feelings about this. I would
yay.
love to vent. Yeah, yeah,
Yay.
yeah. The charity sector is decades behind. We're working on the operating narratives and programs that worked 20, 30 years ago in so many sectors. All these startups, these for-profit ventures, they're for profit, but they get it. What you want to do is try new things and innovate and iterate. And if it doesn't work, you shut it down, and that's okay, right? But if
Yeah,
you don't take those risks, you're never going to find what works. You're never going to find the innovation. You're never going to help the world in the fantastic ways that scientific innovation in the US has done, right? I mean, the incredible innovation that's come out of Silicon Valley, like the MacBooks that we're doing this podcast on, the healthcare innovations that allow us to live 10, 20 years longer and can provide for, our children who might have, formerly untreatable diseases who, through innovation, are now able to be cured. I mean, so many of these things are from the kind of risk can do attitude that for profit startups are taking. But
right,
nonprofit startups are so rare. Nonprofits often are just piling on to old programs that we can run good stories on that have very little impact at the end of the day. I'm a huge fan of what's considered nonprofit entrepreneurship or charity entrepreneurship, which is doing like a startup approach, like what your husband had for a nonprofit program. That might be for caring for animals, it might be for providing for the sick in the global south. There's a great organization called Charity Entrepreneurship, which actually it's like Y Combinator, but for nonprofits. They'll take a couple dozen people, they'll pair them with co-founders, and they'll provide them around $150,000 of seed funding and train them to go start their own nonprofit and help you run a pilot to see if it works. And sometimes these nonprofits do work and flourish and grow into tens of millions of dollars. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they fail out and they stop. I have a friend of mine who actually did this, and she was in Berkeley or in the Bay Area, and she co-founded a nonprofit called Maternal Health Initiative, which was trying to provide innovative health advice for new mothers in Ghana, things that would help them to nourish their children more effectively, because malnutrition is a huge problem for new mothers in that area. And they have this huge training program that they piloted and tested, and they were so optimistic. And they ran a test to see if after 6 months or so that these mothers and their babies were healthier. And they found out, like, yeah, the mothers and babies were a little bit healthier, but it wasn't a huge difference. It wasn't a huge win from their nonprofit. And so what they did, even though they had funding, what they did was they actually shut down. They shut down, which is unheard of in the nonprofit space, even though they had money. But they shut down because they didn't see the impact they wanted to see, and because they knew that their time is valuable. And instead of continuing a mediocre nonprofit or scaling a mediocre nonprofit, they could use what they've learned and go join a different nonprofit or start a new nonprofit and have
right.
much more impact.
Yeah, I just love that because as a consumer of an iPhone, right, I didn't see the millions of dollars and all the prototypes and all the stops and the starts and the innovate. I just see the product, right? And I think that's, what I mean? That's part of it is as we don't, if unless you're in the world, you don't really understand, and like a donor doesn't understand, like, why would I give money to something that, Well, how do we that you're not sure it works? Well, how do we know it's going to work? How do we know this is the best approach to take to solving a problem?
It's an idol of safety. It's an idol of safety. People are afraid of risk, and I understand that, right? If you're,
Yes.
if you have children and you don't know, what your next job would be, and you're working in a nonprofit and you have an opportunity to take a risk, but it might ruin everything. Like I understand that, but but then our nonprofit, it's a risk of becoming about us, right? I'd rather enter the nonprofit space from a place of strength and really using everything that I have in order to serve others. And that's going to require taking risks, trying new things, shutting down if things don't work, and scaling up what does. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's about the people I can help. And, you know, if I die and all I did was an okay job when I could have done a great job for people that matter to God, I want to tell God, hey, I did a great job with what you've been given, with what
Yeah.
you've given me, because these people are important and my mission was important and I gave it everything I had. I'd love to see that kind of ambition and risk in the nonprofit space.
Me too. Um, Again, I have a lot of thoughts about that, mostly because I'm just going to say this one thing and then we're going to move on because I think this is really important. A lot of passionate people with a lot of vision, we often create boards of people from the corporate world, but they're the risk averse, right? They're like, and it's like the let's do no harm and like, oh, but what if we don't want to waste people's money and all that? And I think our big visions often get put down as something that feels more like you said, it feels more tolerable. It feels, and instead of like, if you really want to make change, it has to be bold. Like nobody's anybody who I want to say anybody who did something amazing probably had people telling them, "This is ridiculous. It'll never work. This is too crazy." Because
100%.
that's what makes change. That's innovation. It's something no one's ever done before, and you just have to try. And I feel like we are making strides, especially with the funders to start funding things that are, quote unquote risky, that more of that startup entrepreneurial spirit of problem solving instead of like, yeah, yes, it's a nice thing and you're doing a nice thing. Now, if I'm an executive director listening to this thinking, what an amazing conversation. Wait, hold on. Um, does my program give you maximum impact? Does my program actually work? What is a simple way? Like, what can we do to start taking more accountability and understanding, what impact we are making?
So if you run a nonprofit, if you're an executive director or you're on a board, really ask yourself this hard question. Stare into the abyss, right? Stare into the abyss. Ask yourself at 3 a.m. like, what is my nonprofit trying to do? Like, what is the change in the world that we want to bring about? Right? What's the underlying change we want to see, right? And name it. Be really specific about that. Oftentimes, people conflate outputs with outcomes, and I don't know if you talked about that on your podcast, but
Yes.
outputs being the thing that your nonprofit produces, the widgets, right? That might
Yes.
be like the toys that you produce that you give away, whereas the outcome might be the joy that a child experiences when they play with that toy, right?
Yes.
Name it. What are the outputs and the outcomes that are in the theory of change of your nonprofit, right? And then of those outputs and outcomes, ask yourself, are you actually providing those as cost efficient, as maximally cost effectively, right? That doesn't mean low overhead. That means great output, right? Per dollar spent. So if your goal, for instance, is to save lives, right? Your whole goal is to save lives. You realize that that's your goal because you've been providing health services for maybe heart problems in your local community and helping people get their heart rate checked and helping people get medication to bring their blood pressure down. And your whole goal is to save lives. Ask yourself, is this only restricted to my community? Is my goal to just simply to save human life? And if it's simply to save human life, are we saving lives at the lowest cost possible? Are we saving lives as much as we possibly can, given what we've been resourced? And actually, when you find out that when you do this analysis, almost always there's somebody else, some other program that is able to do it even more effectively. So then you have to ask yourself a few questions, right? One, should what can we be doing better, right? Is there something we can do to match their effectiveness and impact, right? Programmatic changes, maybe overhead changes, where we're allocating the budget, maybe our program model is broken. Maybe those we're serving are in a really high cost area, or there's just other burdens or structures that are in the way. Two, you should ask yourself, should I jump ship? Should I jump to a ship that is sailing better and faster towards the goal that I care about? If my goal is saving lives and there's a ship right next to me that's going 10 times faster, doing 10 times as much, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Maybe I need to switch up my career and move sectors. Right now, on the example of saving lives, the most cost effective charities at saving lives are not just 1 or 2 times better. They're not just 10 times better than average. They're hundreds of times better than average per dollar spent at saving lives. So, and I'd be happy to talk about the research on that. And that's a pretty settled conclusion. And right now, the lowest cost way to save a life is providing things like malaria treatment or preventative medicine for mothers for vaccination in rural Nigeria. GiveWell has done tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of hours of research around this. GiveWell, it's a charity evaluator. So ask yourself, given the outcome that you really care about, is your organization maximally effective? If not, how can it be maximally effective? If there's no feasible way, maybe you should consider switching your career or starting a new charity that would be more effective.
Yeah. No, one of my clients, well, that they've been my client, I've been their client. We have a multifaceted relationship. Is locally here, the Foster Adopted Care Coalition, and their 35th anniversary was a couple of years ago, and they made a plan of how they were going to go out of business. This is how we can no longer, and it was how much money and staff they needed to actually solve the problems that of kids in foster care. And there was a three-pronged approach. It was re-upping and giving more support to families facing foster care. It was more, move quicker to reunification, and then of the very few kids that would need adoptive homes, like moving them out. And they're like, and if when we do these things, we are going to greatly reduce the need to even have a thing like this, right? This won't even be a thing. And I
Yeah.
thought, man, what if every organization had a plan to work themselves out of business,
Some really
right?
don't want this, right? Like some nonprofits do not
They
want
do
this.
not want this.
They do not want the problem they exist to solve to end.
Right? Because like, okay, I'm in marketing and somebody says, 150 years of this, and I'm like, you haven't figured out how to solve that yet? Yeah, 150 years of what? It's like you've been working on this for 100, and that is not something to brag about. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
it's not
That's
something to,
not the
right, right.
tagline that you want. Because I'm looking at that and I'm saying, you've been, working on this for 100 years and still haven't figured out how to make this better. Um, but if you look at somebody
Well,
like the mark,
sometimes the right thing is just to switch problems, right?
right?
Like if
Like,
people are
like
tackling a problem
it's
that
like
is
I was just gonna
so
say,
entrenched, yeah,
like the March of Dimes. Like there are people that is an organization that has shifted the mission to fit the needs, right? And so yes, you can't like, oh wait, like a lot of HIV AIDS organizations, AIDS is very different than it was in the 80s. It was a death sentence.
yeah.
It's not
I mean,
anymore.
fantastic. They basically like dramatically reduced deaths by
So they're
AIDS.
looking, this is about health and poverty, and there's an organization that's in St. Louis my friend is very involved with called Doorways, completely shifted what they're doing, still very effective in helping people, but they're just working the needs of the community, like responding to the needs of the community. But how can I put myself out of business?
But that's
Like,
hard. So it's hard because organizations that become big enough to solve a problem often aren't agile enough to pivot from that problem after they've
right.
solved it,
Or
right?
you
And that's
become
so common.
entrenched. You're like, well, wait, I'm going to put all these people out of work. I'm going, um, it's hard to imagine you not existing. But I think that is, and I just love Melanie, the executive director of the Foster Adoptive Care Coalition, because she's like, and if you ask anyone on the staff, oh yeah, we're here to put ourselves out of business. That is a firmly held value. And it's not an abstract concept. And so that's what I would think too, like
So
in
good.
that 3 a.m. existential conversation is, what would it look like to put ourselves out of business,
Mm,
right? Like what
mhm.
what could that would be bold enough and brave enough to actually solve something? Like I interviewed this one
Yeah.
woman on the podcast, and she's in Massachusetts, and like we are solving children's hunger in Massachusetts. She created, like, I can feed you, or I can create, and not, I created this coalition of like 100 organizations, and no kid in Massachusetts will go hungry. I will guarantee you that within 5 years, this is a problem we can solve. That's why I say everything's solvable. She's like, I
Mm,
don't want this job anymore. I
yes.
want to make
That's
sure
so wonderful.
every kid gets fed.
And and I get it. People are always worried about the risk, right? The risk that this doesn't work, or that people lose their jobs if we pivot or downsize or whatnot. But I also understand the other risk, right? And the other risk, as a Christian, I really believe this. The other risk is one day at the end of your life, you look back on the life you had, and maybe you face God in heaven. You look back on the life you had, and you have to give an account for every resource you had, for every moment you had, for every opportunity your nonprofit had. Are you really going to say that when we had the chance to solve this problem, that we said no, that we didn't because it was too risky, right? Like,
Yes.
I don't want to have to face God and say that one day. Like, to me, that's the bigger risk, right? Much riskier than trying to scale up a solution to a problem, much riskier than putting myself out of business as a nonprofit executive, is showing up to heaven just well fed, well slept, and having no good account to give for the life that I've been given.
Yeah. Wow. That is a lesson. Um, so if you could, if the folks listening to this is such an inspirational conversation. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it in a minute, but what is the one thing that you would say if you're a nonprofit leader? Like, what is the one advice? What is the one thing you would have them do or change to really start implementing this?
So I'd be I would ask yourself, what is the theory of change of my organization, and what is the outcome at the end of the day that we really care about, and are we maximally effective at
Yeah.
this? Now, if the answer is no, don't worry. Like, most people's answer will be no. There's some other organization, maybe on the other side of the world, that's doing it more effectively, right? And that's a good place to start. Ask yourself, am I thinking globally enough? Because oftentimes the best way to tackle this problem, whether it's education or health or even animal welfare, it's going to be in a community outside of ours. That might be an industrial farm, or that might be like people who are underprivileged in the global south, who are just out of sight, out of mind, receiving much less resources than the projects that we're currently promoting. And that's why they're actually so much more cost effective. It's because nobody's gone to serve them. Now, go through that exercise, figure out what is really the outcome that I care about at the end of the day. And am I tackling that as effectively as possible? If you aren't sure, a good place to start is to look at some evaluators, charity evaluators, looking at charities like GiveWell charities. GiveWell is a fantastic evaluator for the global health and poverty space. I would say the best evaluator in the global health and poverty space. There's an animal welfare charity, because I know you like animals,
Yes.
and it's called Animal Charity Evaluators. Animal
Okay.
Charity
All right.
Evaluators. And they
All
have
right.
fantastic in-depth
That's
reports
a great
for
place to start.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
I
check out one of those evaluators.
And I would love for people to check out your book, All the Lives You Can Change. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Oh, yeah, yeah, All the Lives You Can
There it is.
Change. And we're going to have a link to Christians for Impact and everything in the show notes. So if people want to get in touch with you, um, and
You
you can,
can write me at jd@christiansforimpact.org. We provide free one-on-one career advising for hundreds of leaders a year. And we do that because we want to help people who are mission aligned. So if you're tackling one of our priority problem areas, we'd be happy to come alongside you and
oh,
provide
that is
advising.
amazing. Okay, bit of a tone switch here, JD, but this is how we end it. This dog is this dog is something else. Okay, so if we are ever in the same city, if you're ever in St. Louis, where are you located again? Where
I'm in
where
DC.
DC. Okay, I'm in DC and we wind up at a karaoke bar. What's your go-to song?
I'm a Sinatra guy, so I'm going to
Oh, I
sing
love it. Yeah.
And I've Got You Under My Skin.
Nice.
Yeah,
I could totally see you doing that. That is great. So we're gonna have to do that. I got to hear this for real.
that sounds amazing. Let's do it.
This has been, I knew we were going to have a great conversation. I am so excited. Do we get the book off your website or can you get it other places? Or is it the best
Get
to
it
get it
on
off your
get it
website?
on the website or Amazon or wherever you feel most comfortable getting a book. There's ebooks and an audiobook coming out. So this is released April 28th. And All the Lives You Can Change, we give sections for how you can think about maximizing your impact with your career, with your donations, with all of your resources. And we write it from a Christian faith-based perspective. And it was a joy to write. So happy to share it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
And
me.
and that is it for this episode of the Influential Nonprofit. That was incredible. If you want to connect with me, my link's always in the show notes. And I am so excited to have this. Please check out his book, and we'll see you next time.